All right, so the lesson that we're going to discuss for this meeting is about nonverbal communication. So I know you guys already have an idea what is it because you already discussed this one last time. So the lesson objectives for this meeting, at the end of the lesson, the students can determine the characteristics and functions of nonverbal communication and utilize nonverbal communication in various contexts. Right. Nonverbal communication, or NVC, is a non-linguistic transmission of information through visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic or physical channels. It is the transmission of messages or signals through a nonverbal platform such as eye contact, facial expressions, gestures, posture, and the distance between two individuals. So basically, when we say nonverbal communication, it is relaying of information without the aid of words or spoken attributes of communication. You can use the visual, auditory, tactile. You say tactile, it's about, or it refers about the touch, kinesthetic, or it refers about the body movements. So you can use these forms of communication even if you do not employ words or any verbal attributes in communication. Right? So here's the difference between verbal communication and nonverbal communication. In terms of use of words, verbal communication uses oral or written words, while nonverbal communication do not use any oral or written words. So that's the most basic difference between verbal and nonverbal. Verbal, you use words, either written or oral. Say nonverbal, you do not use any words, either oral or written. So types of communication: in verbal, oral and written. But in nonverbal, you can use visual, audio, or combination of visual and audio, or the visual. And even your silence may mean something. So the way to understand: in verbal communication, it's easy to understand, while nonverbal communication difficult to understand since there's no what do you call that, um, linguistic system when it comes to nonverbal communication. Although there are shared meanings when it comes to our gestures, our facial expressions, but basically there's no linguistic system when it comes to nonverbal communication except for uh, sign language for deaf mute. In terms of structure, verbal communications are highly structured since there's the system that governs the rules by language and that can be applied in verbal communication. While nonverbal communication lacks informal structures. What I have said, there's no linguistic system. That's why it's hard to decipher the meanings. It's hard to understand. In terms of this distortion of information, there's less possibility of distortion of information in verbal communication since you can explicitly express the intention, the motive, the purpose of the message in communication. But in nonverbal communication, there's high possibility of distortion. It's because there's no words being used in nonverbal. There are no words, meaning the participants, especially the receiver of the message, will just interpret by his or her own way of interpreting nonverbal gestures. In terms of continuity, verbal communication begins and ends with words. But in nonverbal, continues until the purpose achieved. This is because the person who will try to decipher your message when it comes to using nonverbal communication will really try to think on how to decode the message. So feedback. Verbal communication gives a less and delayed feedback, but a nonverbal communication gives a lot of feedback. So it gives a lot of feedback when it comes to nonverbal communication. It's because it's not easy to understand or decode the meaning of the nonverbal gestures. Okay, characteristics of nonverbal communication. First is, it is nonverbal cues show interaction among people. Even if a person does not understand the language spoken around him or her, he or she can still interact and communicate what he or she wants to convey. So even though it's hard to interpret the meaning of nonverbal gestures sometimes, but there are instances that it's easier for us to decipher or decode the meaning if those gestures being employed by the sender are being shared or they're commonly shared by people. Okay, like for example, this gesture in our context, in our culture, it means okay when we thumbs up. So even if we do not say it's fine, or even if we agree to people, to other people, but when we just sign this gesture, we already communicated that we agree or we say okay to other people, even if there are no words that being uttered in our response. Okay, next is nonverbal cues suggest how people feel. When you are bored listening to a lecture, you do not have to say out loud that you are bored. Rather, your slumped posture, breaking of eye contact, and glazed eyes can already show how you feel, right? So our posture, our countenance say a lot about our psychological condition or our mental state. Like for example, if your shoulder is in slump position, you probably are tired. You're probably tired. So if your teacher is asking you a question about an incident and you are involved in that incident and you can look directly to the eyes of your teachers, it may mean something. When you try to avoid looking at him or her directly. So there are meanings of those facial expression. So if you have a gloomy countenance, probably you have problems or you are struggling about something. So our facial expressions say a lot about how we feel, about our current emotions, our current emotional conditions. So that's why in online class, it's really hard for us teachers to know if you really understand our lesson or um, what's your feedback, what's your reaction about the discussion about the virtual meeting because we can see your faces. Although we really understand if some of you or most of you or all of you do not use camera, it's really fine with us because there are what do you call that? There are considerations that we have to make, especially when it comes to internet connection, because I think using camera and microphone can take a lot of data, but it's really fine. Although it's a struggle for us, but we know we can cope with it. Next is nonverbal cues provide clues, not facts. It is impossible to interpret nonverbal messages accurately. Real meanings still need to be verified. So in nonverbal communication, it is just your own interpretations. You may assume that the meaning of laughter or the glare of people uh, might mean that they are referring to you when in fact it's not their intention about what you think about them. So sometimes we misinterpret people just because they stare at us or they're looking at us without knowing what's the real intention or what's the meaning behind those looks, those stares. So it's hard to know the facts when we try to decipher facts when it comes to nonverbal communication. Although, as what I have said, we have commonalities in terms of using nonverbal cues, but not all of the nonverbal gestures, nonverbal communication cues can be interpreted correctly or shared commonalities when it comes to the meanings. And functions of nonverbal communication. So even if it's hard to understand, it's hard to decipher when it comes to nonverbal communication, but actually they are functional. They can be used for different purposes. When you try to convey an information or when you try to relay something to other people. First is complementing. Nonverbal behavior complements the verbal message to express meaning. Excuse me. Complementing can be used or can be employed, especially if you agree to something, such as others' ideas or notions or statements. For example, nodding. Say yes. Ganun. Okay, for this one. Thumbs up. In our culture, thumbs up meaning you agree or you okay, which means that you complement. In this one, like for example, when you are a fan of a sports and you are watching a game, a play of your favorite team, and when your favorite team scores a point, then you compliment the play of your favorite team by cheering or fist pump. Next one is contradicting. Nonverbal communication is sometimes that's used to oppose the meaning of the verbal message. So it's not that nonverbal communication you can only use when you agree, when you complement, but you can actually use it when you contradict other people, which means that you can use nonverbal communication when you express disagreement other people. Okay. Opposite of thumbs up, thumbs down in our culture. Or for example, um, in our when you are in a conversation, then you yawn. It may mean that the conversation is boring. That's also a form of contradicting. Next one is accenting. Nonverbal cues can help emphasize oral messages. So when you want to give emphasis to the message that you want to convey to other people, usually accenting is utilized when the speaker thinks that the message is very important. Because, for example, when you're giving a speech or when you are in the middle of giving a speech, when you are in the height of your emotion, you use verbal gestures when you think that the part of that speech of yours is important. Meaning, you give emphasis if you think that the message is very important. Or it's like soliciting to the listeners that they should pay attention. So we can use nonverbal communication when it comes to accenting in various purposes. It could mean that you want to emphasize that the message is important, or if you want to elicit the attention of your hearers or the receivers of the message. Just like this one. For example, if you try to watch videos in YouTube, you watch the late former Senator Iram Defensor Santiago. She employed a lot of accenting in her speeches. Next one is substituting. In nonverbal communication is also used to express something without saying anything verbally. So basically, we say substituting when you do not want to say anything, but you just use nonverbal cues in order to communicate. Like, for instance, when someone asks you for a direction or location, there are instances that we do not say anything to the person who's asking us for the location. We just point our finger to the direction or to the location that is asking for. Or we just use our lips to point. Ganun. We just use our fingers or our lips in order to point the direction. That's a form of substituting. This one. Next one is regulating. Nonverbal cues can also be used to control the flow of verbal communication. When it comes to regulating, it's usually used when the speaker wants to control the flow of the communication. Okay, for example, the most commonly used form of nonverbal cues when it comes to regulating is the intonation of the speaker, especially in paralinguistics, the intonation of the speaker. You compare the intonation pattern of a person who wants to continue talking and a person who wants to end a conversation. Okay, for example, if a person wants to continue talking, usually he or she is in a high intonation, mataas in intonation. But when it comes to if the person wants to end the conversation, the intonation is in low intonation na. So that's another way of distinguishing the nonverbal implications in communication. Or you may use hand gestures like this. When you want other person to stop or halt his or her speech. Next one, repeating. Repeated nonverbal cues have specific meanings. Okay, so repeating, okay, when a person repeats a gesture, possibly the receiver of that communication situation did not understand the meaning of what you are referring to, since nonverbal gesture is confusing. So our speaker repeatedly use the same gesture or repeatedly use the same gesture if there's an important message, or where the speaker uses gesture repeatedly since nonverbal cues sometimes employed to accompany verbal messages. Another example in repeating. Repeated nodding expresses agreement to a point, while repeated shaking of the head shows disagreement. But the what's the harder part in understanding when it comes to deciphering the function of the nonverbal communication is that they can overtake or overlap the functions or meaning. For example, the substituting can also be misunderstood as a form of um, contradicting or accenting or complementing, but we can decipher the function when it comes to understanding the whole context of the communication. And there are types of nonverbal symbols. First is kinesics or bodily movements. So kinesics is a study of body language as a form of non-verbal communication. So basically, when you say kinesics, it refers to the body gestures, body movements, facial expressions, the implications of our physical movements. That's kinesics. And we have eye contact. Maintaining eye contact signifies that you pay attention to the conversation. Okay, for example, when you talk to your friend or when you talk to someone, when you pay attention, usually it will manifest on the eye contact. Or if there's a colloquium or a seminar, when you build eye-to-eye contact with the speaker, it means that there's a rapport in the communication. Second is facial expression. You can always choose which expression you can show or hide. So facial expression is a form of nonverbal communication. It may mean something about your current condition, about how you feel, about your emotions, or anything. You can fake your emotions, but there are times that our facial expression really manifests what we truly feel inside. Next one is gestures. Gestures refer to any purposive movement of fingers, arms, hands, head, or shoulders to emphasize or suggest something. So gestures, the movements of your body, like the fingers, the arms, hands, anything that could be used in order to convey something. We also have the posture. Your posture also conveys a message to your listener. It comes to when you have a slumped shoulder, or when you are bored, or anything that or what you feel inside, it will manifest on your posture. Next one, you have paralanguage, the use of voice. Paralanguage refers to the nonverbal sounds accompanying oral language. These elements can help shape the meaning of the message or completely change it. So sometimes when we hear someone speaking, we can interpret different meaning, different from the words being used on the communication or on the message by trying to understand the paralinguistic cues, the voice behind the verbal sounds. We have the tone or vocal quality. Tone is the distinct sound of one's voice, meaning that's unique in every speaker. Well, have you noticed when someone is speaking, even if you do not see the face of that person, but you can identify who he or she is? That's because the tone of this person because that's distinct to him or her. Next one is the speed. Speed refers to the rate of speech or how fast you are talking. So sometimes when we are nervous, we speak in a fast manner. That's why our current condition can also be manifested the way we talk, how fast or how low. Next one, the pitch. Pitch refers to the highness or lowness of voice. Pitch also the other term for intonation. Next one is the volume. Volume refers to the loudness or softness of voice. So the strength of our voice can also mean something. Next one, we have haptics, or the use of touch. Haptics is a study of how touch is used to deliver a message. People differ in the way we perceive and use touch. Culture defines the meaning of human touch. It varies according to the age, sex, and status of the people interacting. So basically, when we communicate other people, we can use touch when we want to say something or we want to convey a meaning to a message. Okay. These are the classifications of touch. We have functional or professional touch. When you say functional or professional touch, it is observable in workplaces. So, especially in the Philippines, we have a high context culture. We pay we pay a higher regard when it comes to what do you call that? Power distance. See, power distance, it refers to the difference of the social status of people or persons, the communication. For example, when you talk to your boss, when you talk to a friend versus when you talk to a friend, there's difference. In talking to your boss, you really have to be professional. But when it comes to talking to your friend, there's intimacy or there's informality because there's difference between the power distance um, of the participants in the communication. Next, we have social or polite touch. Like for example, in handshakes, the initial connection to another person in a professional setting usually starts off with a touch, handshake, or a person's handshake can speak volumes about them and their personality. So in a social or polite touch can also be um, in a call that in a formal meeting or an informal meeting. We have friendly or warm touch. So as what I have mentioned earlier, there's difference when you communicate with your boss, with your supervisor, with your manager, and comes to with your friend. There's formality and informality between the two. And we have love or intimate touch. So or sex and sexual touch. So this form of touches usually in a romantic relationship, boyfriend or girlfriend, or between the spouses. Also, proxemics, the use of space. Proxemics refers to the way people use space to convey meaning. Okay, you see proxemics, it refers to the distance in the communication. We have various types of distances when it comes to communicating and in terms of the distance. First is the permanent structure. Permanent structures refer to immovable places in which we live or work in. So it may mean something. The structure in our workplace, in our home, there's a meaning to that. Next one is the movable objects. The types of objects and their arrangement in a room depend on the intended message. Okay, for example, in State of the Nation address, the president, the excuse me, the directors and the organizers of the event usually arrange the setting where the president will deliver the speech depending on the intention or the purpose of the message of the president or someone who gave a speech. We have informal space. It is a person's invisible comfort zone, an intimate space around him or her at any given time. So informal space, that's our personal space. That's our comfort zone. That's how we give distance to other people when it comes to our privacy. Proxemics is very noticeable or observable when it comes to comparing the culture of Americans and Filipinos. In Americans, they value so much about their privacy. That's why in the US, there's a distance. There's noticeable distance when it comes to in public spaces because Americans value their privacy unless they are having interaction or socialization with other people. And in Filipino culture, for example, in jeepneys, it's fine with us, although it's different now because um, we need to maintain social distancing. But during the in pre-pandemic, when we ride a jeepney, we usually have a close proximity with other passengers. But in America, it's different. You should maintain a distance between the other passengers. So that's the difference between the culture of America and culture in the Philippines. Although that's just one of the manifestations of the differences. And you also have personal appearance. Person's appearance depends on his or her age, gender, race, educational attainment, and profession. The way you dress and groom also communicates your social and cultural. Okay, in personal appearance, it really talks a lot about our personality. So there are specific fashion styles when it comes to the age and gender. It's noticeable like now. For example, among the Generation Z or generation, diba? When you look at the boys, they are fond of wearing, we call it stripes, t-shirt. Even the brand of the clothes define the social status. Like for example, yung call that brands na also. Like Oxygen, Pen Shop, Regatta. Okay, these brands, they mean something when it comes to a specific age group. Kasi it maybe refer to the social status. For female, they have different sense of fashion also. And in the professional field or in the corporate world, they have different kinds of clothes. You have to be looked so professional. But In the US, it's also different. Even in a professional setting, even they're having a business meeting, they just wear informal clothes or clothes that they're comfortable with. But in the Philippines, you should wear corporate attire when it comes to business meetings. So communication also differs in culture. For example, with clothes, the type of occasion or context often suggests what a person should wear. But even when the dress code is restricted, a person's personality is still evident. A person's clothing choice and grooming can also differentiate him or her from or associate him or her with other groups. Like for example, in prom, there's a theme that you need to follow when it comes to wearing the kind of clothes based on the theme of your prom. So that's our clothes will also um, manifest based on the context or the situation or the event. This one. One of the noticeable manifestation of clothes is yung sa K-pop, Korean pop culture. They have distinct type of sense of fashion. Next one is the hairstyles. Your hairstyle also gives off a message. A, a girl with short hair could be seen as simple and unfussy, while a person with hair dyed a striking color as pink or blue could be seen as unique and bold. So our hairstyles, the color of hair can also mean about our personality, about our preferences. Like this one. Next one is accessories. Accessories such as piercings, jewelry, and the like tell something about status. Some people who wear expensive or elaborate jewelry are perceived to be of high social status. So the meaning of accessories we wear depend or vary from culture to culture. Just like this one. In other cultures, wearing um, different types of accessories. If you wear many accessories in your body, it may mean something about the social status, just like this one. Mga high context culture. And the tattoos. Some cultures use tattoos as a way of distinguishing ranks and showcasing their cultural heritage. So our tattoos may mean about our personal preferences, our personality, but it also talks a lot about our cultural background or our social status in a community, in an ethnical community. It's like this one. Wangud. I want to show you a video. Wait. Let's watch this video. Next one.
Uy, Ginalo. Usan Belinda? Nakoy, Joe. Unsa man? Kibaw ko naman gwapa ko. Nga naman. Kaya daghan magod ko amigo na pangit. Mga klase sa katawa. Ang normal na katawa. Ang witch na katawa. Ang kulang sa ginhawa na katawa. Ang nadidinig katawa. Ang pinugnan na katawa. Ang pinuhas na katawa. Ang katawa nga na planong di maayo katawa. Ang hit na katawa. Ang gantsaw na katawa. Ang pabebe katawa. Ang kaniyak na katawa. Ang tawa-tawa para di maupi katawa. Ang throwback na katawa. Ang katawa una ay istorya katawa. Ganun lang! Nakuingot! Ay na! Hulungan ako! Ganun lang! Naamang ko yan! Ay na! Agoy! Ugang way undang nagkatawa. Sige no?
Another one.
No one told you that was gonna be this way. Your job's a joke, you broke.
Andrew's father, by the way, you go.
Your job's a joke, you broke. You're not lasting away.
No idea.
I don't know. I'm telling you. I can do it. Yeah, you can do it.
It's like you're always stuck in second gear.
Crazy-eyed, hairy beast man. He was like a Bigfoot or a Yeti or something. Hi, just so you know, we didn't mean to bother you. We actually thought you were like a Yeti or something. Hi.
So you like the short hair better?
What? Yeti? I'm Danny?
When it hasn't been your day, week, your month, or even your year, but
Hello?
I'll be there for you. When the rain starts to fall, I'll be there for you. there for you. You two are happy, then I'm happy for you. I'm fine. Really? Absolutely. I'm fine. Totally fine. I don't know why it's coming out all loud and squeaky, because really, I'm fine. I'll be there for you. I'll be there for you. Yo?
Well, I guess Joey went home. Oh, and look, there's still one box that I have to unpack. Oh my God! You almost gave me a heart attack. Oh.
Still in bed at 10, we work together late. My best friend and my sister, I cannot believe this. My best friend.
It's already 10:49. I think you have next subject. So that's it. Those are the videos that you watch are the manifestations of nonverbal communication. So it's the end. And we don't have time anymore to cater questions. Um, with regard to your performance task, I already announced, right, that you have the same your PT in oral com and APP is just one, it's just the same. Um, for this week, you're not going to answer the assessment activities in the modules, but you have to start making your PT. By the way, later in our APP class, I will emphasize the performance tasks that you need to comply in my subjects. All right, so that's it. Thank you very much, guys. So you may leave now. I think you have a class pass. Thank you.
Bye, sir.